Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Her Story in the Making at a very special time. And not only are we at a special time today, we're also going for an hour. Why, you ask? Well, instead, where we normally put in and highlight up and coming female content creators in the fantasy sports space, today we have one who is very established, has a huge following, and on a personal level, somebody that I have always admired. We are bringing in the real Lisa Ann. Lisa Ann is a two-time author, one of The Life and then The Life Back. She's a podcast host of the Lisa Ann Experience, and she also hosts Sports Talk on the Bettor Network. So we will be getting her in here to chat with us in just a few minutes. If you guys have questions for her in the chat, please feel free to throw them in. We'll get to them as soon as we can. Next week, we also have another special time. We are interviewing Hannah Rowland from the UK. That will also be at 2 p.m. Eastern. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. And thank you guys so much for joining us. We are very much looking forward to this. Like I said, on a personal note, when I first got into fantasy sports, I was still bartending. I would leave the bar and listen to SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio on the way home. At that time, it was always Lisa Ann Does Fantasy with her and Adam Ronis. And I continuously learned so much from her throughout that experience. And it is just an honor and a dream to have her on the show today. So I hope you guys enjoy this as much as I am. I'm pinching myself. You'll see that on camera. It's because I can't believe that this is really happening. So yeah, we are so excited to bring in Lisa Ann.
And hello there to you, Britt, Flynn. It is so great to see you. I finally found you on Instagram, and now I know that you are a cat lady.
Oh, total cat lady. Have always been cat lady,
234.
dogs, baby
234.
birds, just everything. Yeah, so it's if you guys don't know on Instagram, I am Cat Lady Britt because I fully own up to that. And reading your book, you also like animals and gardening and things like that that people might not necessarily think about when they see you doing sports and all your promotions and things like that. So, is that something that you did growing up? You always enjoyed gardening and hobbies and things like that?
Always. I grew up in Pennsylvania. We revolved our life around nature. That's also what ties into being such a sports fan. You kind of hibernate and get to watch games over the winter. And that's also what made me not the biggest baseball fan because this summer I was either gardening, planting, sowing, baking the apples that fell off the apple tree, making applesauce, or I was playing basketball. Those were really the things that I did. And as for pets, I'm so lucky to have so many beautiful dogs in my building. I know them all by first name, and I do not know their owners as well as I know them. But I just travel too much myself to currently have a pet. So I have to live vicariously through others. My best friends all have pets. So when I go and stay at their house, I get to have a dog life for a period of time. But yeah, growing up in Pennsylvania really made me enjoy nature. And even though I live in New York City, I'm close enough to Central Park that I can go every day. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. I love to city bike ride. So as soon as you pull in and you get on the path, you just start to smell dirt. You smell everything that you don't smell in the city. And it's just beautiful.
I totally agree with that. The smell of petrichor and clean dirt just does something to your mental state that you
Yeah.
can't get anywhere else. But we're going to jump right in here. We've got a ton of questions today, a ton of people in the chat. And like I said earlier, guys, if y'all have a question for Lisa Ann, type it in the chat. We'll try to get to it as best as we can. But I'm just going to start off with a couple softballs here. You've said that sports has always been a huge part of your life. What are some of your earliest memories of sports, and how did they end up becoming so integral to who you are as a person?
My earliest memories would start with the basics of just playing catch, right? We were outside kids. So in the summer, we were only allowed to watch 1 hour of television a day between my brother and I. So we had to agree on two 30-minute shows that we would both deal with, right? because of course he wanted to watch the A Team and I didn't. I wanted to watch Laverne and Shirley or Happy Days. And so we played outside. And so I just remember playing catch, then going to the park with a basketball. And, as my earliest childhood memories are playing catch, playing basketball, and skiing. So as soon as I was able to start watching games, that we were allowed to watch endless sports, only an hour of television, but sports. My mom wanted us to be involved, which was so smart. Sports keep you healthy, they keep you focused. They really teach you how to adapt on a team and get along with your teammates. They teach you the strengths and weaknesses of yourself and others and how you can prop each other up by, being a part of a team. So my earliest memories are really just that. And I can remember playing catch in the street where I lived in Palmer Township 4 hours with my neighbors. Like whoever would come out and get in and we'd play for a couple of hours. I was always just such a tomboy. And so to me, that was, fully entertaining.
And you're competitive too. And that's something that I love because I think that we're really similar in that way. One of my earliest memories was playing basketball in a gravel driveway with my dad. And we would start out playing horse, and then I would lose. And I was like, how about we play horse's butt? And then we would continue the game after I lost that and say, how about we do horse's butt crack? Because I could just not deal with losing. And so we had to keep this game going, and it would go for hours and hours. We see some of you guys in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. One question that I've been wondering since finding out that you're a Cowboys fan and you're from Pennsylvania. As a fellow Cowboys fan, I absolutely love that. But you're a Cowboys fan who grew up in Pennsylvania during the Steelers dynasty. So, how did you become a Cowboys fan when the Steelers were right there?
Well, this I would have been closer to the Eagles, so that would have been my team. We didn't really look at the Pennsylvania as it's such a big state, right? Steelers fans and Eagles fans are totally opposite. I was born and raised into it. My dad was a Dallas Cowboys fan, a huge fan of the Tom Landry era. And if you remember, you don't remember, Britt, if you don't mind me asking, I know a lady is never supposed to ask age, but we're realistic in this generation. We do this. How old are you?
I will be 36 in 2 weeks. So, I do remember the early 90s and the Cowboys dynasty.
Right, but let's go back to the 70s and 80s when I was growing up and you had about 3 teams televised. You couldn't see all of the games, and so there were 3 to 4 teams that if you grew up in the 70s or 80s, you most likely were born into a family that was already watching these teams. Now, it did go against the grain to not be a Philadelphia Eagles fan, but that was very much like my dad. I get that from him. He wanted to be the opposite of everybody else. So, if his brothers were rooting for the Eagles. He wanted to bet against them. And so Dallas Cowboys were like the rival even then. And so being brought up and raised in it, being able to see every Dallas Cowboys game was a huge part of the fandom as well, because we never had to miss or listen on the radio.
Yeah, I think the same happened to me in the early 90s. We had uh, growing up on a farm, we had an antenna. So we didn't have cable, we didn't have dish. We got like maybe 3 local channels. If the wind was blowing the right direction, then we got Fox.
Right.
And Fox was where the Cowboys played. And it was always snowy because the reception was so bad. And I just remember
Oh,
thinking as a young kid, I'm like, why is it snowing in Texas right now? And it was because of the reception, but we still somehow made it and managed to watch all those games. But you not only love football, you're all over the place at NBA games, MLB games, NFL. What's your favorite sport or your favorite team, or do you love them all equally?
so my first love is definitely basketball. I can watch endless NBA. It's just such a fast-paced game. It's such an electric game to visit live. My second love would be NFL. I just got into baseball for Better Boss when I started working for Fantasy Sports Radio, so that I could really stay on air all year and to be a part of fantasy baseball. Baseball is better now than ever, and I know the old school baseball enthusiasts are not happy about the pitch clock, but I went to a Yankees game, sat right behind home plate. And I will say it's adrenaline pinching now because you're watching this pitch clock and you're watching somebody maybe stealing a base. And so you know there's a time frame where this is going to happen. So you don't like get lost in conversation and miss a good pitch and then have to go back and rewatch it up on the Jumbotron. You are present. And I love that factor. So that makes me like baseball a lot more. I also enjoy a little NHL. My secret love is golf. I watch every major tournament. I want to play. I took a little brief lesson last week when I was in St. Louis. I said always I would play by 50, but it's a commitment. And when you live in a city where you don't have a golf course 5-10 minutes from you, it's also a whole fiasco. Like, oh, I'm going to spend an hour getting out to Long Island. This is going to be a 10-hour day. I'm going to have to stay up all night working. So I don't have the time right now, but they need to bring a Top Golf to New York. That would get me at least, whacking the balls at there. I'll watch some UFC as well. I got into UFC during the pandemic. It was the only thing we had to watch every week. And I watched every single match, learned a lot about the art of UFC. Also loved leaning into it when there were no fans and you could hear every single hit. So I have a really wide range, but when it comes to live sporting events, I will go to anything.
I love that so much. And I was going to ask you if New York had a Top Golf, and then you just answered that question for
Not
me
yet.
in there.
We're working
Oh,
on it.
hey, guys listening, anybody listening on this broadcast, let's get Lisa Ann a Top Golf in New York. But shifting gears a little bit, let's get into some of your career trajectory. If people didn't know, you were a talent agent for several years in the adult entertainment industry. You also owned a salon for a little bit. How did that experience help you navigate and form relationships with professional athletes and other figures in the sports industry? And did that help steer you in the direction of sports broadcasting?
So really, they're not very connected at all. I'm always just looking for opportunity. The spa really landed in my lap after 9/11. I had been on the road during that time and we were not able to fly back. And by the time we flew back to California, it was like 3-4 weeks later. And I remember saying, I just want to go to the spa. I want to get a massage, get a facial, what have you. I go in and the owner was the only person there. And I had known her for years, but she was so hard to get an appointment with. And she gave me my services and she spilled the beans that she had not been good with her money, that no money coming in. She defaulted on everything. And I bought that business for a very little amount of money and ended up just investing and paying everybody back her bad debts to have them bring their books back. That was just a pure opportunity in a situation where while I was on that last booking, I was flying in the air when 9/11 happened. So we land and we're at the airport and see what's going on. And we realize, you also know you're kind of somewhere you're not going to be able to get home. People were buying used cars. People were renting cars. I remember just thinking, so that whole time we were there, I just kept thinking, well, we don't have a job when we get back because this is what we're doing for a living. I was on the road full time then, like 50 weeks a year with 2 weekends off. And so it was just an opportunity. And she told me her story and I had the spa for 4 years. The spa was a great college education for me because I learned about the State Board of Cosmetology. I learned about the State Franchise Tax Board. I learned about unemployment. I learned about unemployment hustles. I went through pretty much every experience that 4 years, which definitely made it easier to start an agency because it was just another business, right? Once you have, the nuts and bolts of what you need to do to succeed, to profit. But my connections with NBA players and NFL players and people really in this world are because of how they initially came across me. And so it's a funny bond that I have with people that a lot of people will never understand because they assume, oh, anybody that knows you, as Lisa Ann, you're hooking up with them. But most of them, there's just this shared experience of being a celebrity, being well known, me being able to reach out to a player after a big game and just say great game, like they find joy in it. And so it's a fun thing that I get to do because they know of me in one way and I parlay it into this other way because they know I'm a fan of them, like they're a fan of me. So this fandom friendship with the same kind of understanding of our privacy and our boundaries and our lifestyles, we have a connection that a lot of people just couldn't really factor in or understand. And so they find me very easy to talk to. People normally will come to me when they're going through something that's difficult because they look at me and say, well, with all that you've done in your life and all the things you've overcome, obviously you could help me with this minor problem that I'm dealing with. And it's become a really nice unity that I have with a lot of different levels of people throughout the world.
Yeah, and that's something definitely that I've noticed about you is that you do um, kind of branch off and build on these relationships, and you have a lot of foresight with your career trajectory. You've got the talent agent, you've got the salon. You hosted a show on SiriusXM before you began on SXM Fantasy Sports. And it does seem like you're always one step ahead in planning your career and visualizing what you want out of it. So how do you continuously reinvent yourself so fearlessly and just know what you want out of this space in your career?
Well, I think knowing what you want comes directly from knowing who you are. I've always known who I am. I'm someone that likes to try new things, likes to be involved, likes to network, likes to be busy. I like to work hard. And then when I'm with my friends, I don't look at my phone at all. And I'm in that moment and I'm present. So I love to work. And there's a lot of people that would say like that's crazy, but when I'm doing the things I'm doing, these are all the things I chose to be involved in. So I dig into them like, sometimes I'm at my desk for a couple hours. I'm like, I really like what I do. Like, this is fun. This is really fun. So I've always been forward thinking, but knowing that I'm going to want to have momentum. I also like to have multiple streams of income because what I learned in the industry very early, in my early 20s, I learned that when one thing is down, the other thing is up. So when I started, I had this very strict schedule that I would do one feature dance booking a month, one movie a month, one adult bookstore gig a month, and one event, and I'd have one weekend off. And so I had this mapped out because maybe you went to a club and it wasn't busy. There was a concert or something going on in that town, but you know what? Then you went to the bookstore, you did this. So that basis of being so young and knowing that I had to have the discipline to stay engaged with multiple things, to stay financially sound and to plan for my, financial future just kind of really carried and continues to carry. And I continue to add things into my wheelhouse. And from now I'm doing a month of drafts on Fantrack starting in June. I'll be doing a best ball draft a day at all different times of the day. The whole schedule is going to go out. I'm going to live stream them all. It's going to be a ton of fun, a great way to get people involved in best ball. And at the same time, I'm releasing wine. I partnered with a winery in Sicily. So I have a white and a red that's coming across the border right now, going through customs. And so these are two very different things. So when I get bored with one, after I work on it for a couple hours, I bounce over to the other, do a little bit, then I'm go back to this one. And it keeps me really engaged and really excited to like get up every day and go to bed feeling accomplished.
And I love what you said right there that for one, you knew what you wanted to do, that you had to have discipline to do it. And you know how to branch out to doing enough things that you're continuously happy and you're
Yeah.
not stuck in this rut. And I kind of feel like that is where your love of fantasy sports and your fantasy sports career came about because with all of these talents you have, your career really could have followed any trajectory that you chose. So, what made you hone in and want to pursue a career in fantasy sports as your main situation?
Well, I have to give all the credit to Better Boss, who is right here in the room with all of our lovely visitors. Bob Harris, do you see the celebrity sightings we've got going on here today, Britt? Like, this is wild. My friend Petra is here from Germany. We've got a great group. But I met with Matt after finding out that Matt had a show with Playboy Playmates doing fantasy football, and the show had ended. He was looking for, something similar. And so I met with him. He knew I loved sports. I talked a lot of sports on my show that I wasn't supposed to talk sports on. And so he's like, "Oh, do you know fantasy?" And I was like, "You know what?" I met with him in May. And I said, "You know what, Matt? I don't, but I know all my friends do it. So I'll just spend this summer. I will read every book on fantasy sports. I will mock draft all summer. And I will go to all of my friends who I know are not smarter than me and that win these leagues. And I will learn how to do this." And so I spent the summer and I did my first show on Fantasy Sports Radio September 9th of 2013. And it's ironic because I remember the date because September 9 was my best friend's birthday in grade school. And you know how some things from grade school you never forget? I never forgot Stephanie's birthday.
Well, I love that because you're absolutely right. Some of those things just kind of stick in your brain forever. I think another thing that sticks in your brain forever is all of your knowledge of sports and just all the stats. And I don't think that a lot of people realize just how knowledgeable you are and what a great personality that you have. And because of that, unfortunately, some people weren't so welcoming in the fantasy sports world because of your background. So, how did you motivate yourself to drown out that noise and put forth the best version of your product on these shows?
I'm realistic enough to know that in life, not everybody is going to be on our team. Not everybody's going to share our vision. They're not looking through the same eyes. They're not thinking with the same mind. But I'll go back to my last answer. I know who I am. And I know that when I commit myself to it, I'm going to work hard at it. I'm going to be on time. I'm going to go the extra mile and I'm going to do what is asked of me and what is needed from me. And for me, that's part of being committed to whatever I sign up for. So, in passing, you learn in life that a lot of our own thoughts are worse than what somebody else may think. So I've just learned to minimize the chatter. And I've learned to say to myself, like, hey, I get it. Not everybody's on Team Lisa. Sometimes I'll joke about it because I'll see somebody in person. I'll be like, I don't think that person's on Team Lisa. And my friends that I know when I feel that vibe, but I just don't take it personally because we have become so conditioned to allowing our thoughts to be controlled by the thoughts of others because we have all this noise at us with social media and all these opinions with the news and all this like triggering stuff. But really, it's how we process the information that we're receiving. So I let it easy go, easy come, easy go, and just kind of chuckle it off as, oh, I guess, not on Team Lisa. And that's really it because I'm going to do what I need to do to shine. And if it doesn't work for somebody else, I respect that and I understand that.
Yeah, you said something on the Best Women's Boxing podcast that I really took to heart. And you said that people are only as judgmental as you allow yourself to think they are. And I love that philosophy of knowing that not everybody is going to be on your team, that not everybody is going to like your takes. And there's just so much positivity because of that philosophy that you bring to the table. How do you continue to remain positive and drown out negative comments in your life while still giving so much to others in the form of mentorship and charity? Because it's easy to be positive to yourself, but dealing with that and being positive and giving towards others is an entirely different aspect of you.
So I'm a big believer in frequency. So, our life is really a vibration. And what kind of vibrations are you putting out there? What kind of vibrations are you getting in? So I know by my own vibrations that when I look at social media, if it's a day where it's like, I look at it and I'm like, oh, because I'm good. I'm mute, block, mute, block. New Year's resolution this year, one of many was to not troll trolls. So now I'm not even responding back to trolls, which feels great. It's freeing me up a couple hours a day. But I've learned that like when I start to feel that way, I just got to step aside and I got to find something positive to do to raise my frequency. And then I can go back to it. I also have a team working with me that I lead that help me do things like remove negative comments from YouTube, remove negative comments from Facebook. That really helps me a lot because then once I know what we call it, cleaning the streets, once I know the streets are clean, then I'll go in and I know that I have a robust, group of messages of people that are awesome that I really want to chat with. And so we have to find our own ways to regulate how much negative data that we're allowing ourselves to receive. And when you think about that and you really put a number on it, it is worth paying someone to do these things to allow you to be the best you can be. But you have to know yourself. You have to know that when you feel a twinge, you're like, maybe I'm hungry. Maybe this isn't a good time to look at this because in normal state of mind, at the right vibration, at the right frequency, I can look at anything and be unscathed. So, it's frustrating at times, but I don't let it take away from the good that I have to offer to others, to the good that I have to give to myself. And giving to others really has become more fulfilling than ever, and also more available to me than ever since I became a minimalist, because minimalism changed my life to the sense that now I have more time, and because I have less stuff to manage and I'm not managing that stuff and I'm not shopping all the time and all of those things, I can spend time, even if it's just a FaceTime with a friend, even if it's just a text engaging. I have more time to reach out to people in my sphere and say, hey, checking in, what's good? How's your mentals? What's going on? And I'm also one of those people that if I see something on social media that looks like someone might be going down a bit of a spiral over comments or over engagement, I will not reach out to them on a public forum. I will either DM them, or if I have their number, I will reach out. I will ask them if they want to talk. I think we all have the opportunity to see the warning signs that the people in our lives might be troubled by something and might be going down a path that's counterproductive for their frequency. So I think we should all be taking that stance and saying, like, who are your 10 people or 20 or 30 or 50 that you would say, if I saw something negative, I would reach out to them and say, hey, just making sure you're good. That's important.
Yeah, it really is important, and something that I think tends to get lost in this day and age of social media and immediate gratification. And you've got so much going on that it really can distract from both who you are as a person and those people around you. And we tend to get drawn in. And so I love the way that you have navigated that and have such a great perspective. But we're going to switch gears here a little bit. We mentioned it at the top of the show, but you are the author of two books, which I absolutely love. There's so much great advice in there of how you navigated some anxiety and some kind of depression and how you pulled yourself back up and then continued to navigate and rebuild yourself. So, what inspired you to write your story and put your truth out to the world? Was that a way of rebranding in a sense, or did you do it for you?
It was a lot of both, right? I had told everybody in my life that I was going to write a book one day. So whenever I was making a ridiculous decision, I would always go to my friends and say, this is what I'm doing. But think about the chapter that could be in my book. So I sold everything from my teenage years till my 20s of this book, this said book. At the time, I told everyone it was be called Shelf Life, because I knew in the industry from day one that I had a shelf life. I would only last so long. And so that was a big thing. And I ended up coming up with the life and the life back. So the life was really allowing me to tell my story of what it was to get in the business, be in the business, play the role of Sarah Palin, travel the world in the business, all the remarkable things, as well as what it felt like to be getting out of the business and what made me turn to those decisions. And then the second book, The Life Back, really carries you from 2015 when I released my first book to like 2020 when, when the world closes down. I'm like, this is probably a perfect time to write a second book. And I felt like that book really gave an understanding to myself about how we can kind of remodel a home. We can remodel our lives. We can also remodel our mindset, and we can take daily actions every day, whether our life is good or our life is bad, to take a good step forward. When I was going through horrible things in court and a lot of harassment and a scary time in my life, one of the first steps I took was removing alcohol. And so I didn't drink for 2 years because, alcohol is a depressant. And I knew, like, what am I going to do? Sit in my place and drink? Like, I'm not going to do that. And I ended up becoming my most fit I ever was in my entire life, because I was like, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm in no hurry. And I worked out so much. And I go back and look through pictures and I'm like, I tell my friends, like, you can always tell when my life was the worst, I'm the most fit, because that's what I was doing with my energy. And that's a positive way to use the angst that you're feeling and the frustration that you have, and to avoid destructive ways. It's very easy to fall into, oh, I'm going to have a drink. But if you're not drinking because you're happy, you shouldn't be drinking. So that's the way I saw it. And so writing then also minimalism, I wrote a lot about discovering minimalism and how that changed my life. And so these are all like little big changes that put me where I am right now, in a space that's so comfortable, so happy, first time living without a car. And it's like my favorite thing about living in the city is walking to run my errands. Like, I absolutely love that I get in an extra walk. I had a dentist appointment this morning, so I left early and did a little loop in Central Park and then cut through the park to go to the dentist. And I was like, it's just the little things, and it's made me simplify my life. That simplified my mindset, and that's made it even easier to feel happy.
Yeah, I think that, it's so underrated just getting outside and what that can
Oh,
do for your mentals. We've also got a supporter in the chat. My mom's in the chat, saying that that was a great point. Looking out for each other is something we sometimes lose sight of. So that's Mom, thanks for being in the chat. I love
it's
that.
very true, and you know what? I have so many young friends in the city, and they call me their mom in New York, and I absolutely love it because 'cause I'm always teaching them, like, home hacks or making sure that they're safe or, whatever it may be, not wanting them to take the train at night, those kinds of things, but we have to look out for each other. We are our village, right? And no matter what's going on in the news and what things we're hearing that are stressful or can make you very anxious, you still have your people. And when you have your people, break it down. That's all that really matters.
And that's absolutely correct. I think that's another great thing about this fantasy football community. And we've talked about it on previous shows that everybody in this space, for the most part, really looks out for one another and really lifts people up. And that's something that you don't find in other communities. Other businesses, career paths can kind of be cutthroat. And I don't feel like it's that way in this space. And we're just super lucky to exist at a time where that's happening. But going back and speaking of rebranding, that wasn't something that you took lightly. Preparation is paramount for you. And if you read the book, but whether it was for Lisa Ann Does Fantasy, your book promotion, your promotional deals, whatever it is, you are prepared to the nines. So, how do you think that preparation contributes to your success? And what advice would you give to somebody who's not necessarily the best prepared, like maybe me?
Look, the piece of advice I give to everybody is just to be consistent. So if you're not always prepared, then that's fine because you're not always prepared. You're consistent with that. I can remember when I had my agency, I had a staff member that was always late, but he was great once he got to work. And so, everybody would be annoyed he was late. And finally, one day I was like, look, this is his one flaw, but at least he's consistently late and he stays after and he gets his work done and it's okay. Right. So being prepared for me has always just put me at ease. If I know what I'm doing the night before, every night before I go to bed, I write a detailed list. One side is the targets of things that I have to reach on a certain time. And then the other side of the list is the main things that I really want to accomplish that day. I break in where I'll have a little bit of time to make lunch, where I'm going to have time to get out, get a walk, go freeze. I go to cryo almost every day and get in the freeze tank. Things that I do, I wake up every morning and work out, I meditate. So I'm routine. And being routine is something that I even do on the road because I feel like once you break these habits, they're hard to implement back. But the more prepared you are, the more relaxed you are when you walk into a situation or when you hop on air. And you can never be over prepared because you'll use that for something else. That what you're putting together is your time to say, I want to be ready for this and give my all. But it's always been how I've been. I was raised, being very prepared. I grew up with grandparents that had a traveling greeting card business, and I traveled with them over the summer. And I watched everything from my grandmother drawing the maps of where we were going to go all through the US and Canada and writing it in a notebook as week by week where we'd be driving because no internet, you're pulling out a map. And instead of being on the map while she was co-pilot for my grandfather, so she would prepare that. My grandfather would prepare, the greeting cards, all of these little things I watched from them very young. I think they just became second nature for me in everything I was going to do.
I That I always say that I'm going to take away something from an interview. I'm taking away several things from this interview, obviously, but the preparation part is just so wonderful to hear, and I'm definitely going to rewatch this and put that in my own little notebook to
I
make
mean,
sure
girl, when I know
that.
I'm gonna be busy for a couple of days, I do food prep and everything just so that when it is lunchtime, I have a good lunch ready and all I have to do is either put the salad on a plate or heat up the soup or whatever it may be. That's how prepared I am.
Well, there's a comment in the chat and it says, Lisa must have more hours in her day than I do, because you do have so much going on. And I'm like, how do you food prep? How do you list everything out? But it is that preparation. You've got everything down to a T so that you maximize the most out of your hours that you do have in the day. And that's just so important and something that I am still learning.
But listen, I'm always listening to sports radio or watching something sports related while I'm doing these things. So if I'm food prepping, if I'm taking a walk, I'm doing laundry, I am also gathering data at the same time. So that might be where somebody feels I have more hours in the day just because I'm doing more things at one time.
Have you always been a multitasker, or was that something that you had to learn?
Always, always been a multitasker, my whole life, my whole life.
I I love that so much. Going back to the preparation, but in your book, you say that when you met with Adam Ronis, who's also a fantasy alarm and Better Sports, you would show up with notes, like just stacks of notes for that night's show. But then you moved to LA and you started working from home. So did that change your process, not being able to meet face to face with him, or your relationships with the people in the office? And if so, how did you deal with that change and continue to evolve in your process?
So at that time, I really needed to be at home because I was dealing with things that was making me feel unsafe out. So I had to kind of go on lockdown. It wasn't ideal, but what was cool was, you have your printer, you have everything you need when you're working from home, right? So if something comes up, your TV, your everything, but that foundation that Adam and I built together, I would say probably 5+ years straight of eating at the same Italian restaurant at their bar every Monday night together and going through my notes. First of all, Adam didn't have to take that time and want to make me better, and he did. He didn't have to come into the city that early, but he did. And we ended up building this incredible friendship. He's like a brother to me. I absolutely love him, and he made me so much better. I can remember being on air with him when we first started, and I didn't know really about the teas yet. So he like gave a question before the break and I answered it. And we went to break. He's like, that's the tease. Like you're supposed to. And then for then on, anytime I heard a good tease on another radio show, I'm like, that was a good tease. I get it. You know what I mean? Person didn't answer that. That was really good. But it did help me. It changed a lot. I think some of us, yeah, I miss being in studio. I loved being in studio and seeing everybody at the building and doing those things. And we've come to this, we're all kind of working from home, which makes it feel a bit disconnected. It has its conveniences, but for the events that we get together, I see more people coming out. And that's a great thing because whether it's FSGA, Hall of Fame event, those events, we get to bond so much because we all work in different spaces. And being in New York, everybody that passes through here for something always reaches out to me, and I get to get together for a simple lunch or a walk. And so I get the best of both worlds being here.
That just sounds so perfect. Also looking forward to the FSGA. I hope, are you going to the FSGA for the summer one, or
So I
is it going to
think
be
the
in
summer
Vegas?
one conflicts with something else. What's the date of it? Do you know offhand?
June 12th and 13th.
Yes, I will be in Athens, Greece.
Oh, well, how dare you go to Athens instead of the conference in Cleveland? No, have such a great time. That's going
I
to be a
will.
blast. But we've kind of touched on this a little bit before, about how you went through a big change after you moved to LA and you embraced minimalism. And as a part of that, you said in your book, the less you need, the more you can do for others, which just really hit me in the feels. I highlighted it, underlined it, all that stuff. But this led to you being involved in a ton of charity work like the Walk for Alzheimer's and several other charities. How did this work lead to you forming even more relationships and connections in the sports industry?
Well, let me just say you have to read the book, Love People, Use Things. The Opposite Never Works. It's by the minimalist. It's my book club this month. Next Tuesday at 8 p.m., we will be on my YouTube Live talking about this book. I've read it multiple times, but it opened up that thought. And so doing these charity events really connect me again with a lot of the sports radio shows that I do. During the season, I do a thing called Fantasy Football Fridays where I visit remotely a bunch of different shows from all over the US, and almost all of them have a charity that they do once a year. I just did one last week in St. Louis. It's a charity golf event for Birdies for Bipolar. And I go there and I just get to host and ride around the golf cart, visit with everybody, and have a great time. Been doing it for so many years now. They're all like family to me. I've watched them have children, and each time I see them, they're showing me new baby photos. And what's really tenfold is from me doing other people's events, when I put out my own charities, whether it's for the Walk to End Alzheimer's, whether it's for Blessings in a Backpack, all of those people contribute. And so it makes me, a lot more powerful in the space of charity work. And so that's something that I really have found that I've loved. I did the 24-hour walk to end suicide last year here in New York City. I'm going to be doing it again this year. It's in DC. And I can't believe by just posting and sharing with my incredible followers how much money I'm able to bring in for a good cause. And it's just the greatest feeling ever to see who comes through for you and how much of a difference you make. And what's cool is like when you show up at these events, the suicide walk was my first time doing it last year. And so I registered myself in and I went alone and I found other people that were alone and I brought us all together in a group. I was like, okay, I'm going alone. I'll see other people alone. I'll ask who they're walking for. I'm going to make friends. And within 10 minutes, I had made friends. But when I went up to get my little bag and everything, the woman behind the counter was like, oh, you raised so much money. Thank you so much. It was just like the sweetest, warmest. And I'll never forget that moment because all I have to do is share with my followers that this is important and everyone gets behind me. And so by me doing these charity events for these sports stations, I'm closer with their audience. And then again, their audience helps me when I'm raising for a charity.
And that's something that's so important as well. Using your platform for good. It's not something that you always see with other people who have such a high profile. And that is something that I think does make you unique and such a special person. And I can't wait if you have a charity. I know you probably don't come to Arkansas a lot, but if you have anything coming on down here, hit me up and I would love to meet up with you. Guys, if you have any questions for Lisa Ann, make sure to throw them in the chat. We've got about 15-ish minutes left. But we're going to switch topics again because, and this is something that I literally screamed when I read this in your book. You're not afraid to take risks. You should have heard that squeal when I saw that you went skydiving. I went once and it was both the best and most terrifying experience of my life. But how has that fearlessness helped you navigate the fantasy space and continue to propel your career?
Fearlessness pushes me to the reminder of how alive I really am. I just climbed the edge in New York City, where you climb up the side of the top of the building and then you hang off over the edge, which obviously was awesome, but it wasn't scary enough because there's so much. I told the guy, stop walking us through the safety stuff. You're ruining this whole experience. I did have a good thrill seeking experience in Switzerland last year. Really wanted to go paragliding. I wanted to go at Interlaken. I wanted to just jump off the Swiss Alps. And so, went up to took the train from Luzerne to Interlaken just for the day, meet up with this crew. They have this van. They're like, yeah, we do paragliding. We'll drive you up to the top. My videographer was with me. And my videographer was like, I'm going to wait down here. My videographer was not trusting the random van with no paperwork to fill out, just paying them on an app to just drive me up to the top. So we get to the top and the guy gets the big bag out and I'm videoing it, giving my last words just in case. He's getting this like bag out and he's like, okay, here's what we do. We're going to run. If there's enough air, it'll take us off. If not, we'll just fall down that mountain right there. We'll get up. We'll be fine. But I'm like, wait a minute. This is it. There's no safety people up here. There's no check-in. He's like, no. It was the greatest experience because it was so quick to just decide to do it. Riding up this mountain, you're just looking over at these snow-capped mountains. It's so beautiful. You can see the lake, the sun is setting. And I'm like, we're just running off. And then we're just gliding. We glided for about 30 minutes. It was so incredible. I've skydived, I've bungee jumped, I've taken the doorless helicopter. I've been in a bunch of helicopters, dog sledding in Alaska, private helicopter to a glacier, which is scary because when you get off on a glacier and you're standing on it, at any time it could crack and you could fall in, right?
Right.
So I love it. It reminds me that, age is just a number. It makes me feel incredibly alive. And whenever you do something that pushes your limits, you feel so invincible for a period of time after that, where you're like more productive, get more work done, work out harder. Like everything is like amplified because you're like, yeah, I just did that. And it was awesome. I want to skydive again. I'd like to go in some other countries. I wanted to go last time I was going to Australia. Didn't get a chance, but I want to see other places because you get such a beautiful view from up there. Now, can I ask you, did you cry when you went skydiving?
I didn't cry because I was scared. I cried because I was falling so fast that my face was so smashed that I couldn't help tearing up.
Because I went
Um,
with a girlfriend who, when she was done with the dive, her goggles were like filled with water from tears. I was dying laughing.
no, I was having the time of my life. I think I threw like the hands up, the entire way down. It was a blast. I was going to ask you if you had anything planned next for your next thrill-seeking adventure, but you just threw out all these things that you've done. Is there anything that you haven't done that you think that might be
So
next on your list?
yes, I really want a heli jump ski in Alaska. It's when they drop you out of the helicopter on like an cleared path and you just ski down. And like we had it planned to go and the pandemic happened, but right before we were supposed to go, there was an accident. And so my friend was like, "Well, do we really want to go?" I'm like, "Well, now it's safest than ever because there was already just an accident. Yeah, now we go." And then we didn't get to go. So yes, I'd love to do that. I wouldn't mind, an underwater excursion, swimming with the sharks. We used to do a little quarry diving when I was a kid in Pennsylvania. And that's always kind of really scary, right? There's like random stuff under there. We weren't using any dive gear or anything. We were just jumping in these quarries that there was still work trucks underneath that just hit water. You know what I mean? And if thing filled up with water is man-made. So I love doing anything like that. It's just I also would love to go up in a hot air balloon. Haven't done that yet.
I feel like with all these ideas that you just threw out there, that there might be a new reality show in the works. So if you manage to find any more time in your very, very busy day to film a reality show, I think that would be something that would be incredible. Um, yeah, that's super exciting and cannot wait to follow you and see when you finally do accomplish those next
Oh,
few
we have a good
things.
question. Where's a place you've never been that you want to next? Have I ever been to Iceland? I have not been to Iceland. I'd love to go to Iceland. I have been to Finland. I want to go to Portugal. That's a place that's definitely next on a list. I haven't been there yet. But I've traveled to pretty much every country. I haven't done Africa or Asia yet.
That's Iceland is beautiful from what I've seen. I think my husband was showing me pictures and it's that time getting into summer where the sun never sets and you just
Like in
get these
Alaska. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you just get these beautiful sunsets like continuously throughout the day. Um, so yeah, we're gonna all have to stay tuned and see what your next adventure is for that. We've got a few more minutes here, so any last minute questions, please throw them in the chat. We would love to hear from you guys. And I'm gonna switch gears yet again. With so many things in the sports world are driven and controlled by men, how do you create your own momentum to achieve your goals as a very intelligent woman in the space?
I just don't look at myself as different. I look at everybody and everything as equal, right? The only disadvantage we have is men don't have to lose an hour doing their hair and makeup, and that kind of does
Oh,
irritate me. Men
preach.
can put a camera in front of their face and do a parlay the 10 minutes after they wake up. So there's that. But my grandfather always wanted me to feel equal. He never wanted me to be afraid to be a girl. He always told me that I could compete in any way, shape, or form that I wanted. So I really don't let it be about that. I do understand that we have something different working against us as women, and not just myself coming from my background. I see this from all women. People are incredibly creepy and demeaning online. And so automatically, if a woman gives a pic, there's comments that I read, these threads that I read that I'm like, okay, 90% of these comments were unnecessary. And if you actually think that, you probably should retrain your brain and you actually put that out there. So, that allows me to feel not so alone. It allows me to understand that that's just what it is. We still live in a space where women are not treated equally in many workplaces, but we have to look at ourselves as we are equal. We have to, I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you say bounces off of me and sticks to you. And that has to be our thoughts, right? Because otherwise we're going to get caught up in the fray and we're going to lose our momentum. It's hard to watch, but it's a real thing. And we've all learned to battle through it. We've seen some of the most successful female broadcasters of our lifetime are just growing and growing and growing. And it's been incredible to watch. And I see how the female sports community really supports each other more than any community I've ever seen in any workspace. We're all always liking each other's posts. We're all always making sure we're there and present. And so that's what we can do is we can build a larger force field to make sure that we're knowing that we're supported. But in our minds, we have to see ourselves as equal, not look at any disadvantage that would limit us, and just keep doing what we love to do.
And does it help in any kind of aspect to think that most of the things that these men say online, they would not say to your face? I mean, does that
It
help?
doesn't for me because I feel like if you're putting out there into the universe, like, when you say something, when you write something, when you tweet something, to me, it's all the same. What bothers me more is the fact that we walk amongst these people, that when I'm at the airport, I look around and go, 20% of the dudes here are probably leaving weird comments on somebody's page right now. Like that's where I go with it. And I want to know who they are. And no, they probably would not say it to our face, but to me, it's just as bad. You're putting those words out there. That is a vibration, that is energy, and that is negative. And I worry about the generations. I see, some of the nastiest comments will come from somebody that has his family in the banner and hashtag girl dad. And I think
Always.
to myself, like, one day your daughter is going to see your timeline and see all the stuff that you say. So we're going to see the next layer. I mean, we just got word today in the news that we have realized that social media might not be healthy for teenagers. So, like, now that we're finally reeling that
Now that
back
we're on
in,
the same page.
we're all really plot twist. That's just crazy. But it's important to just stay focused, stay positive, and think and realize, like, sorry for that person, that's what they feel is what they should be using their time for today.
I 100% agree. I think that's great advice. And for all you guys listening out there, take these notes away. Let's all be positive and be better in the space. Since you're such a trailblazer in so many areas, what advice do you give those future creators who are interested in pursuing a career in either sports broadcasting or fantasy sports?
When you're putting yourself out there, you can overanalyze yourself too often. Whether you get off air of doing your show and you're like, that was not a good show. Like, you'll go back and retrace one thing that you mispronounced during a read and you'll beat yourself up about it. Same thing with content. There was a time where I would go to make content and I'd look at the photo for an hour and still not want to post it. Now it's like, let it go, let it be out there, share yourself organically. It's not always going to be perfect. That's why people love live. That's why people love to be a part of it, because we're all humans and no one is perfect. So it's about creating consistent content and keeping yourself out there consistently. Don't fall into the getting insecure for 2 weeks and not posting, because that's going to hurt the algorithm on social. And that's also going to hurt your algorithm in life. Life is just like an algorithm. When you pull yourself back, you lose momentum. So keep doing it. Keep believing in it. Keep networking with other people that you find creative and interesting and fun. And social media allows us to reach out to each other with the ease of just following somebody and meet other creators. And to me, there's a ton of negatives, but there are a ton of positives on how we can utilize social media to build our world globally and have these interactions for free. I mean, I understand a lot of people didn't want to pay for Twitter Blue. I didn't want to lose my blue check because I went through it so much. And also, I feel like Twitter's been free for so long. And I've made so many friends from Twitter and I've made so many great connections. So to me, I'm like, I'm paying for it just because I didn't pay for it before. But up until now, we could say social media was free.
Yeah, it is kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because like you said earlier, we do have to deal with the trolls, but on that other side that outweighs the negative so much is the positivity and the outreach that you can get on social media and the relationships that you can build that you might not have necessarily ever been able to make had it not been for this thing that we call the internet. Um, a few more questions. Last call for questions in the chat before we get going.
Oh, I got Chris. Chris says this is why AI will never replace the human content. Have you leaned in yet, Britt, on AI? Are you working with Chat GPT yet?
I have not, but I need to. I'm actually doing a panel, and the topic at FSGA is AI and how I see it affecting content creation over the next 5 years. So, thanks, husband, for ruining my thunder, buddy. I'll allow it. It's his birthday. And then, mom, again, with some great advice. Don't overanalyze yourself. So hard to break that habit. Um, Thank you, Jeff, for tuning in. We really, really appreciate having you here. I'm going to ask just a couple more questions before we go here. Um, you've put out so much great advice here today. Um, but digging a little bit deeper, knowing what you know now with how the space has changed, some of the hurdles that you've had to overcome, or even some of the positives that you found that you didn't necessarily think that you were going to get. Is there anything that you would have done differently in your career, knowing what you know now?
Yes, it would be what your mother just said. Don't overanalyze your health self so hard, right? It is so hard to break that habit. When I look back and people ask me, what's one thing you would change? I wouldn't worry as much. I worried a lot, and there's still times where I worry, and I have to say to myself, like, girl, you got yourself this far. Like, relax. Like, it's gonna be okay. But I didn't come from much. I was out on my own really young. There's always gonna be those in the back of my mind, could I be in that situation again? Like, what could happen? Right. And you worry. It's just the worry, because the worry is just a distraction. So, what I've learned is whenever I have a negative thought, I have to balance it out with a positive thought. Whenever I feel something negative, I have to balance it out with something that feels positive. Sometimes just sitting down for a minute and thinking about your friends or a trip that you just take is enough to switch your energy. And so that's really the only thing I would change. Every mistake I made, I'm glad I made, because it got me right here, right now. Mistakes can be very interesting. Not everything's going to be a success story, and failure is such a huge part of success. And so I accept failure easier now than, of course, I ever did, because as you get older, you worry about less and less. But it's the point now where when things go wrong, let's say I'm in a group setting and maybe our flights got canceled or something happens, I'm the one that is just unaffected. My friends are like, how is this? How are you so unaffected? I'm like, well, this is out of my control. Really nothing I can do about it. I'm not going to worry about that. But as for businesses, I've tried things and failed. And I've looked at it like, well, at least I tried. There could have been something else, but I tried. So don't worry so much.
Yes, it's all in perspective, and everybody, I think it's human nature. Everybody questions themselves. We all have imposter syndrome. Just know what you're doing is good enough, and you're doing the most that you can. We've got one more question for you before we get out of here, and I just want to thank you again so much for coming on. This interview has been absolutely incredible. Let the pinching commence again, because I can't believe that this happened. But this show is called Her Story, not just because we want to hear about your past, but we want to know what you have planned for the future. So, where do you see your story continuing over the next few years?
I'm always going to stay in the space of communication between doing Better Sports Live on Better Sports Network every Wednesday night, 7 to 10. My podcast, Lisa and Experience. I'm working on another book. I got a little book project going on. Wine's going to get me go out and communicate in person. So to me, it's just going to be staying actively engaged with all of the layers of people that I've met throughout my life, through my travels, and continuing to travel and meet them and see them, growing my world to be able to give even more time to charity, and mentoring as many people as I can. I have a very strong force of women working with me now, and through them I meet other women. I have a women's group here in New York City that I lead, and I just really want to continue to inspire and to look after my people, and have people know that if you're part of my life, then you know that you're loved and that I got you. So that's the most important part of my story.
This is the positivity that we need here today. And I could not thank you more for spreading such great knowledge, such great advice, sharing your story with us. We just really appreciate having you on. Now that I know that there's a book on the horizon, definitely looking forward for that. But thank you again so much. Guys, join us again in 2 weeks on June 6th. It'll be at another special time at 2 p.m. Eastern, as we are interviewing Hannah Rowland out of the UK. So we're going international again. Um, just let us know if you have any more questions. Hit us up on the Her Story and Women of Fantasy Football Facebook and Twitter page, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for having me, and happy birthday, Chris.
He can say that